In our second episode, we bring in Steve Chaffee. Steve actually succeeded Coach Smo and was the head varsity coach from 2003 to 2016. In fact, Steve and Coach Smo overlapped for about 5 years when Coach Smo was still the varsity coach and Steve was for the modified for a couple of years and then at the JV level. And Steve's going to talk about that instant connection that they had when they first met. Some really candid stories of them coaching together and really just revealing the huge heart that Coach Smo had for all of his players. And also a story that I love and got to witness firsthand was how Coach Smo continued to mentor Steve and myself and stay involved in that program and really just be an infinite source of encouragement and positive support for us as we can try to continue his legacy and continue to lead the program the way that he envisioned it being led. So none other than head coach Steve Chaffee. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're bringing in our former baseball coach, Steve Chaffee, who actually succeeded Coach Smolinski as we continue our series in remembering Coach Smo. So I guess, well, first of all, Steve, thanks for jumping on in short notice here and being able to, try to paint this picture with us.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. I'll do the best to paint the picture of Coach if I could.
There's no doubt you're going to have a unique perspective that nobody else, can really bring to the table here. So this is kind of exciting in that sense. So I guess we'll help try to establish our timeline first. Tell us, when did you first arrive at Hamburg, and then how soon thereafter did you start connecting with Smo?
So I started at the high school. It was the 96-97 school year. That spring, I actually coached softball at Immaculata. That was my first real coaching job. And that summer, actually, the guy who was the JV coach had passed away, strangely, and the modified coach had gone to JV. And so I interviewed for the modified job. And that was kind of the winter of 97 / it was spring of 98. So really the first I met him, other than being on the sideline and going to watch the kids, because I was at the high school, so it was fun for me to go watch a high school baseball game. But really meeting him, I met him downstairs at the bottom before we went up to Chuck Amo's office for the interview. And Chuck had somebody in his office, and Dave was down there, and we just started chatting, and it was pretty obvious that, it was a nice connection right from the start. We talked a little baseball, but more like, who are you, where are you from, and all that good stuff. And then we sat up in Chuck's office, and it was, I felt like I had a good chance of getting the job. Like I said, he was really good.
Yeah, I could only imagine those conversations. Yeah, so natural. So you get on board and you're kind of learning the ropes as you go there. What were some early stories that jump out as you observed him from the modified and eventually the JV?
Well, the first couple of years, I had helped my high school baseball coach out. And obviously varsity starts a couple of weeks before the modified does. So I sat in the gym every second I could just to soak in, what I could from him. And I'll tell you, he dressed the part. I sat through his first meeting with the kids, every detail. And he was old school. There's no doubt. I mean, he's, no cutoff tees. You're going to wear baseball pants. You're going to look like this. You're going to act like this. I don't want to see you playing basketball at Highland Avenue. Immediately, I'll kick you off the team. The season's too short. You jam your finger. It's costing your friends. He was strict, but man, what a soft heart on that guy at the same time. He'd turn around and him and I would get together in the coach's office afterwards and have unbelievable conversations. And he's the type of guy that really firm in front of the kids, but you could tell at the same time, like when he had to make cuts or he had to make tough decisions, it tore him up. He lived it. He loved it. He loved the kids. So I soaked in as much as I could from Coach, and not a lot of connection the first couple of years because of me being a modified.
Mm-hmm.
Then 2 years after modified, or after a couple years of modified, and he'd come by, he'd watch games when he could, but you know what it's like.
Yeah.
Whenever it's a sunny day, we're all playing. So we played over at Legion Field, obviously. And then for some reason, the JV job opened up, and I progressed right into the JV job. And that's where we kind of coexisted a lot more. Like, I hung out in his practices, he hung out in my practices. We'd go out for a drink afterwards. We discuss everything, every detail. Are we doing things right? Are we, between cuts and all that. We really became good friends. He was invited to our wedding. He came over here, brought gifts when the kids were born. I remember when we moved from our apartment on Pleasant Avenue to over here on Holly. A bunch of guys were getting together to move, and he pulled in the driveway and he goes, "Here you go, boys. Here's a case of beer, but I ain't picking anything up." Yes, perfect.
Oh,
So
my God.
that's really where we made it a real good connection, was the JV and varsity combined. If I had the opportunity, where my game was canceled, I was definitely on the sidelines with him and helping him out. So that's kind of where we really, and from that point on, I will tell you this, that I was pretty surprised when he decided to give it up after my third year at JV. And the reason mainly was because he had a couple tough years in 01 and 02, but he was dealing with guys that should have been with me on JV. Like, I had a really talented group of 9th and 10th graders. And finally, these kids are becoming seniors, and he said, "It's yours." And I go, like, "This is what you've been waiting for." He goes, "No, it's your turn. You've got the energy." And he just handed me over a really good baseball team. And so I give him so much credit for that. He just, he said, you're a 30-year-old kid. You've got the energy. You're spending time in the off season. It's kind of how the game had progressed. And he saw it, and to give him a ton of credit, he said, it's yours, run with it. So really appreciate that.
That's amazing. I'm glad you mentioned that. And that's something I had in my notes was, I not so intentionally, but a lot of coaches do retire and kind of leave the cupboard bare.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he did the extreme
Oh.
opposite. He left us with the cupboard stock full of amazing student athletes.
He did, and if you knew Coach well, he was a single guy. He was a lifelong bachelor. He had a great group of friends, and every game he coached, he had five or six guys there
No kidding.
supporting him. And, I'm sure that they busted balls and had a great time. But so I remember when after he had turned it over in 03 to me, and then I obviously you came along with me. That was your first year.
Yeah.
And I kept calling. I said, you coming to the game? Yeah, I think I'll be there. I'll try to be there, and he wasn't there for the first few games. And I think it was hard for him,
Sure.
But then he finally came, and boy, did he pick the wrong one. He came, we were playing Will East, and he just was kind of hiding over by the drinking fountain. And Artie, do you hear that squeaky toy?
Yeah.
So he's hiding over by the drinking fountain, and Jerry Gauze, "Smoker, what's up?" It just was like, oh my God, like only Jerry Gauze could. He's yelling, he's calling him out. Everybody, the bleachers are looking, and he just was trying to go incognito. But I'll tell you, that season, and nothing to do with what you and I did. We were so new at it. I think we started 5-0 that year that we took over. And his buddies were ruthless. They were because the 2 previous years before he had turned it over were really rough years, like 1 or 2 league wins. And his buddies, they were just busting chops nonstop on the poor man.
Yeah, yeah, that's what friends are for, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
dear. Um, oh my gosh, that's so funny. The I guess between, if you kind of take into consideration some of the stories you had heard about coaching before you had got there, and then from what you observed, what were his real strengths as a coach that stood out to you?
Well, his strengths were he like, for one, he brought it every day. Like like I said, he changed. He put full baseball uniform on. He came from Armor. He was an elementary school teacher, obviously. So he'd walk in with a tie and a button-up shirt, and he'd walk in the office. He'd switch, and he'd suit up, and he would bring it. He brought everything he could to every practice. In the old school, when we got outside, L screen. Why would I need L screen? Every year I feel like he ended up with like a black eye or some big bruise. And like, why do you not pitch behind an L screen? I don't need an L screen. Like, it's crazy. But um, those were the things that he just he did it his way, and there's a lot that I took from him.
Hmm.
There's things that we changed, but I took notes from his first speech, and I remember relaying a lot of that same information. But he changed. He suited up. He showered afterwards, and he left the school looking like he did when he got there, with his tie on and everything. Real professional, and every game I had ever watched, I never saw him lose his cool.
Hmm.
He was real even keeled. He really had a relationship with all the coaches he coached against. Never blew up at an umpire. He's got a great history of baseball and understanding baseball, and so I just think that he took it all in stride, and he didn't let it get to him too much.
Wow. Yeah. Obviously, so valuable in baseball. I can't. As you're describing that, I can't help but think, like, I'm thinking about all the stuff that I've stolen from you, like some of your opening speeches on the first day of practice and stuff, and how much of that could ultimately be traced back to Coach Smo.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. I mean, I could pull out yellow pads and that are in my desk drawer, things that he said, and there were other things. It's kind of funny because he was probably only 3 or 4 years older than I am now. When he retired, and you know what I mean? So I was like, man, his old guy, and I'm like, geez, is that me? And he's talking about, I don't want you wearing Budweiser, Spuds McKenzie t-shirts and Johnson this. And I'm like, what is these kids don't even understand what he's saying. And now I find myself telling jokes and the kids are like, what is that? Talking about Jerry Seinfeld, and they're like, who's that? So funny.
Oh,
But, and honestly, what a heart. He always he was so well traveled. It
mhm.
was one of those things where he was a bachelor, and he probably looked at us married guys with kids, and he probably at some point wished that was part of his life. And then we watched him travel to away Bills games or go to
Yeah.
Florida, or never missed a golf round, and like, damn, what a life. It's
That's
like, he lived it to the fullest. He had a blast. Every year he'd take me to Pegasus, and we'd have breakfast together. Um, and he would be like, yeah, I was in a month with so-and-so. I came home for 2 weeks. I went to a Bills game in Kansas City, then went back to Florida, went out to Vegas for 3 weeks. And I'm like, oh my God, like, unbelievable. And then he'd say, so here are the dates. I want to take you to a Sabres game and bring a friend. And I think you were a benefit of
yeah,
that before too, right?
big
So,
time.
we'd go to breakfast every year, and he would take me to a Sabres game and let me bring someone along. Just an awesome dude, awesome guy.
Well, that's a perfect segue. I mean, you really walked right into the spider web, because I wanted to kind of finish with, that transition. And I felt like it wasn't like he just kind of left you the keys to the shed and said, "Good luck, kid." I think he was a really valuable mentor. Talk about how he played a role in those years after he retired.
Yeah. So, like I said, we would meet every now and then, and obviously we would chat on the phone, and Actually, we played racquetball together, and I looked at him like the 60-year-old man, and I'm 33 at the time, and I don't know if I scored a point. It was unbelievable. Like I used to play all the time, and it was just, and he's just kill shot, kill shot. But as far as a mentor, he was always there for a phone call. You talk about making cuts, or you talk about whatever, finishing the season, or you're just starting to slump a little bit. And he was always a great, like I had mentioned earlier, just a real even keel guy. Nothing really got him too wound up, and great guy to go out and have a drink with and just talk about, what was going on. Just super friendly with my family, and couldn't ask enough about it. The kid, what are the kids doing? What are they up to? So, he was a mentor, not only baseball, but education. And, sometimes things go on with whether it's the union or administration, or, I remember back in 76, we went on strike, and we, what I mean? He has always had an experience, and it's nice to have someone who's been there and done that,
Yeah, for sure. I remember, those first couple of years that we were coaching together, and, whether it was, talking to Bob Barros at Orchard Park, or like you said, or, Jerry Gauze at Will East, these other guys that had coached against him for so long, and to hear them speak with like the respect and the reverence that they had for Schmo, let me know right away, like, wow, we're stepping into some big shoes.
Yeah. Part of, I think, I don't know if it was a bit of a turnoff for him, but these kids played high school ball. They either played Legion ball or they played house ball. And right towards the end of his career, travel ball came along, and that was tough for him because, sometimes kids were putting that ahead. That was a priority over high school ball or Legion ball. And it really was I don't know. He didn't understand it. He didn't see it. And high school is a priority. And you saw the transition that we had to kind of say to the boys like this. And luckily, travel ball coaches kind of met us halfway and said, listen, hands off during the season. But he didn't understand all this paying so much money to play and private lesson. Well, my coach says this, and it was a real turnoff for him because he really enjoyed the kids, and he had a lot of passion for what he did. And I know that was one thing that really was a change, you know what I mean? And pitcher coming in and not having any of that, and all of a sudden it's, the infernos or
I can't imagine. Yeah.
What is this, So that was an interesting, to get from my side. And I remember, us having full conversations about the priorities and all this. And I even had to talk to him about, coach, sometimes baseball's not their priority. You know what I mean? It's a basketball kid, but we're fortunate to get him. And, maybe if he's playing at Highland Avenue, but we still need, maybe there's some leeway here. We got to find some flexibility in this. He was funny. And he obviously introduced me to his brother, Danny, and still have a good relationship with Smoker. And he was always a good guy to have on your side or a relationship with, as umpiring. And that's kind of when I would see David Moore, is when his brother was umpire. He'd come by and because they were just houses next door to each other, and they were tight as can be.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Any stories do you remember about them in their playing days, or?
Not really. I know that they had talked so much about Boston Town League.
Okay.
And we started using that field. I think we used it a little bit for SEBA, and then obviously we used it for travel with Evan. And they used to have conversations about what it used to be like Sunday night ball, and all the whole town would come out, and coolers in the crowd, and there was no security, and if somebody didn't like a bottle fly on the field, he said it was old school, but it was great. I mean, that's when people would come out just to watch a game of baseball, and I don't talk about Field of Dreams, but that's what to me it sounded like. People would come out. It was. I think they were unbelievable from the sounds of it when they all got inducted, and
Hmm.
It was good stories. He was really proud of that.
Yeah, it's hard to for us to appreciate what those crowds would have been like, but that's, I mean, every story you hear talks about the quality of the play and the crowds and the community support. It's pretty cool to imagine what it was like. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of grew up that way too. I mean, we had two options in the spring where I grew up. You either played baseball or you ran track.
Hmm.
Lacrosse wasn't there yet, and so a lot of your athletes played baseball. And I think the quality of baseball was just phenomenal. And I think they played every chance they get. That was back when Sandlot and pickup ball and a bunch of kids show up at the field and they just play. It's,
Yeah.
it's really fun to think about.
It's crazy. Well, before we let you go, we want to make sure we gave you a chance to empty your pockets here. Is there anything we missed or overlooked yet?
No, I think we hit most of my stories with Coach, but I'll tell you, just the times to go out and sit at a Sabres game with him, or sit and eat breakfast with him, or have a drink with him, and you know, now that Coach is gone, it's just you think about how precious those times are, and you never forget about him. Honestly, the whole month of March, I swear he wore the same purple high socks that he hung over his locker, and we're in there talking about who to cut, and I'm just like, oh my God, at some point, obviously, you've got to wash these clothes. You're a bachelor, I get it, Coach, but it just was funny. Like I'd leave there, and then the next day I'm working with like McFadden or Muchika, or I'm like, Coach's socks are horrible. I might actually take them home and wash them because he hangs them over the locker, and I think it's 30 days straight. Oh, but he, towards the end there, he had some tough decisions. I think he handled it well, and to my surprise, when he turned it over, what a great opportunity for me. It was. I
Yeah.
give him a lot of credit for that.
There's no doubt, and I can't wait to hear more stories. They're naturally gonna come out over the next couple of weeks from former players of his and
Sure.
such. And I know, like when you and I put on the purple, and a good deal of that pride that we feel in our school colors was built by guys like him. And
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, the conversations they must have had in the staff lounge, and what a great group of guys that came through before us.
that's for sure. Well, hey, buddy, thanks so much for jumping on here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Enjoy it.
yeah, we'll continue
Gonna
to
miss
tell
him.
the story. Yeah, we sure will, man. All right, buddy. Take care, man.
All right. Thank you. See you.